I don't believe in ghosts, spirits, or anything supernatural, but that night was weird. This is a 100% true story retold to the best of my recollection. It was senior year of high school, and my two friends, Nick and Noah, and I had this weekend ritual, exploring any supposedly haunted place we could find. We'd scour the internet for lists of local ghost stories and creepy spots, ticking them off one by one. Most were disappointing, just urban legends or strange coincidences. There was a forest where there was a light at a specific time in the night. We never saw it. There was a bridge where you were supposed to honk at midnight, flash your headlight 3 times, and something magical would happen. Nothing ever did. Then, we saw a name at the bottom of the list. The Knorp House. Apparently, it was once a plantation house when Union soldiers came to free the slaves. The owner hung them from the trees surrounding the property rather than let them go. Over time, the house had fallen into disrepair with just enough updates to make it livable before it was abandoned for good. After some debate, we decided to explore the house. So the weekend rolled around, and around 3 a.m., we packed into my Pontiac Bonneville for the 30-minute drive to the house. The rain was light but steady, the kind that settles into your bones, and the road's dead. I know it was 3 a.m., but we saw not a single car. The house was set back from the road, gated off, with only a small gravel lot nearby where we could park. It seemed like a maintenance area for the adjacent railroad. The lot was clearly visible from the road, and we joked nervously about how easy it would be for a cop to see my car and suspect we're up to no good. Still, we had no other choice but to park there. The first thing we noticed was the gate, or rather, what was left of it. 2 brick pillars flanked the entrance to a long, overgrown dirt driveway. Whatever gate had once been there was gone and replaced by 3 cement blocks that made it impossible for cars to pass through. We climbed over them, officially stepping onto the Knorp property. The online list had called these brick pillars the gates to hell, claiming they had some mystical effect on anybody who walked through. I didn't feel anything supernatural, just the chill of the damp October night. As we continued down the path, the woods grew thicker, and without our flashlights, we would have been lost. The trail was barely visible, and we kept stumbling, losing our footing in the mud. After what felt like hours of navigating through the trees, we reached a shallow creek. I crossed easily, thankfully for my waterproof boots, but Noah, who had worn slides of all things, cursed under his breath as he wandered through. Just when we started doubting whether we were even on the right path, I shined my flashlight ahead, and there it was. A massive white wall loomed out of the darkness, so sudden and imposing that it made my heart skip a beat. The house seemed to have materialized out of nowhere, its discreet form nearly swallowed by the overgrowth. The roof had partly collapsed, scattering debris across the yard, and part of the basement wall had caved in, exposing its insides. A rusty air vent dangled precariously from the basement ceiling, creaking in the wind. We approached the house cautiously, circling around the side in search of the front door. The property was so overgrown that we felt like we were trekking through a forest, vines and thorns tugging at our clothes. Then, we heard it. A faint shuffling sound, just ahead of us. We froze, exchanging uneasy glances. It was a kind of sound that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up, as if something, or someone was stirring in the basement that had access to the outside thanks to the broken wall. My first thought was a homeless person had taken up residence in the house, and we were about to trespass on their territory. See, I knew it wasn't a ghost, but I thought it was either a guy or a deer about to charge at me. Back up, I whispered, motioning for Nick and Noah to retreat. We all backed a few feet, then stood still, straining our ears, and the shuffling sound grew louder. The wind had died completely, and yet the noise continued. "Is that a guy or an animal?" I called into the darkness, gripping my pocket knife tightly. In retrospect, it was a dumb question. I mean, what was I expecting? An animal to answer, "Hey, yeah, I'm just a raccoon." Still, the tension was palpable, and I wasn't taking any chances. I edged forward, my knife at the ready, the shuffling sound intensifying with every step I took. One step closer, another. Then I saw it, the terrifying creature responsible for all the noise. An armadillo. The three of us relaxed, the tension evaporating as quickly as it had come. I pocketed my knife, feeling both ridiculous and relieved. We inspected the little fella, just minding its business, and decided to leave it be, and not explore the basement. We continued our trek around the house, finally reaching the front door. There wasn't actually a door there, but I assumed that's where the door was supposed to be. Inside, the house was even worse than we'd imagined. The floors were covered in shattered glass, walls battled as if somebody had gone at them with a sledgehammer, graffiti covering the walls that remain, some of it surprisingly artistic, some of it just messy tags. The layout was straightforward, 4 rooms on the bottom floor, 4 on the top. The 4th room on the bottom floor was completely caved in. The floor had collapsed, creating a hole that led straight down into the basement. The floor above was in nearly as bad a shape as the one below, so we decided to steer clear of that area and head upstairs instead. We passed the stairs leading to the basement. Well, I guess there weren't stairs, as there were none, just a sheer drop. I was relieved I had my flashlight. Without it, I might have missed the 9-foot drop onto the rubble and concrete below. The stairs were steep and creaky, their worn-out carpet treads barely clinging on. Upstairs, the back left room contained remnants from previous explorers, a grill, and a few beer cans. I guess the people before us were much less creeped out than we were. Eventually, we finally reached the master bedroom, essentially 2 rooms without a separating wall. The room was empty, covered in graffiti, and still without any furniture. At this point, no ghosts had shown themselves, so we decided to bring out the big guns, an Ouija board. Nick had brought it along, and we set it up in the middle of the room. I placed my phone leaning on support pillar in the middle of the room, providing light in filming the session. We gathered around the board and placed our hands on the Ouija triangle thingy and began the ritual. The first question we asked was, "Is anybody there?" To our shock, the thing began moving. We were all adamant we weren't moving it. I still talk to Nick all the time, and he still promises that he was not moving it. And Noah also promises it wasn't him the last times we talked about it. The answers it spelled out were nonsensical, random letters and numbers that didn't make any sense. We kept asking questions, and we would keep getting random letters as answers. We were about to call it quits, then Noah decided to ask, "Are you the owner, or are you a slave?" Before he could even finish his question, the light from my phone abruptly shut off, plunging us into the darkness. It took a moment for me to switch on the other light, and when I checked my phone, I found out the battery was completely dead. I charged it fully before we left, so I still don't know how it happened. We sat there, feelings of fear and confusion fighting for power. Breaking the silence, Noah suggested that maybe supernatural entities feeding off electrical power. It really didn't make us feel any better, and I didn't buy into that anyway. After the Ouija board and the unsettling phone blackout, we decided it was best to cut our exploration short. I didn't want to risk having my car spotted by the police, so we all quickly packed up our things and made our way back downstairs. As we passed the gaping hole leading to the basement, the graffiti and the destroyed walls, the cold aluminum rain hit us again as we stepped out. We made our way back to the rear of the house, glancing back at our armadillo friend, who seemed to have found shelter from the rain among the remains of the basement. As we made our way through the trashed rear of the house, the silence was suddenly shattered by the roar of an engine. The sound was coming from the direction where I had parked my car. There shouldn't have been anybody else around. We heard the sound of tires screeching and gravel being kicked up. Panic set in. We immediately assumed that high schoolers, or somebody, were messing with my car. We decided to run back to the car as quickly as possible. In my mind, I hoped I had locked the doors, or that they wouldn't break in. Mud covered our shoes and pants as we sprinted through the creek and up the trail. I was no longer cold, but instead sweating from the running. We reached the gravel lot. We jumped over the concrete blocks at the gate of hell and finally arrived at my car. We stopped. There was nobody around. The engine noise had completely stopped, and there was no sign of anybody having been there. Looking back, I don't even remember the sound fading like they were driving away. It's almost like it just stopped, like something wanted us out of that house and did whatever they could to make it happen. and it worked. We got into the car, locked the doors, and went home, relieved that nobody was hurt and my car was unharmed. To this day, I don't believe in the supernatural, but that night, yeah, that night was weird. I've been asked if I've had any strange encounters with any cults. Well, from what I recall, I've only had two. My first one, I ended up becoming acquainted with a group of Wiccans who were celebrating the summer solstice. It was great, and I ended up leaving completely trashed. My second one, not so much. So for some preface, there's a park just outside of Richmond called Belle Isle. People kayak, fish, and hike. There's an area of Belle Isle simply called the Rocks, where a lot more illegal things happen. A lot of drinking, smoking, skinny dipping, intercourse, and all that fun stuff. I, of course, was always there. There's just something about the Rocks, just the simple, pristine beauty of it. About a mile down from the entrance to the Rocks, there's a tiny little cove where a massive and decrepit pump house from the early 1960s sits, abandoned. I've seen a bunch of people jump off the third story into the water below, almost like a diving board. Now, when I said this object was big, I mean it was big. It stretched for about 50 feet and stood maybe 150 feet tall. There was maybe 5 floors total. There wasn't anything entirely fascinating about the place, to be honest. It was just a massive concrete husk with old piping and scaffolding. The park closes at dusk, as do most area parks, but that didn't stop anybody from getting out there, starting a fire on the rocky outcroppings, and getting wasted far into the late hours of the night. I did that, of course. It was maybe midnight, before I had decided that a 12-pack of past blue ribbon, 3 or 4 joints, and some s'mores, it was time for me to roll out. Packing my small backpack, I went ahead and started out towards my truck. After rock hopping for about a quarter mile upstream, I passed by the old pump house. I recalled there was a pathway behind the pump house that gets me a lot quicker to the parking lot, so in the dead of the night, armed with a flashlight and my little .32 Colt, I started making my way down the path. Walking along the trail, it borders a brick wall of the pump house. I noticed a door I had never seen before, a massive and heavy looking steel door. My curiosity piqued, so I decided to test the door. Sure as hell, the door moved. It swung open with a loud, groaning, scraping sound. I shone the flashlight down the hall, a set of stairs that leads down presumably to the control room. I pulled my revolver out slowly, holding tightly on the walnut grip as I crept down into the bowels of the pump house. Making it down to the base of the stairwell, I noticed a few things right off the bat. Number 1, it was indeed the control room, with old grimy dirty panels. Number 2, the smell hit me hard, like sickeningly hard. It reeked of mold, mildew, and blood. Number 3, the sketchy looking pentagon that sat in the center of the room. Yes, a whole pentagram, drawn out in chalk, with some incredibly sketchy and questionable stains on the floor. Number 4, the candles that were burning around the creepy circle. I looked around the panel room, surveying it. My heart leaped out of my throat when I heard footsteps and talking coming down the staircase. Panicked, my eyes looked around until I found a locker that was big enough to get into. I quickly got in and very quietly shut the door of it and stayed silent as the grave. I watched through the gates of the locker, feeling like I was in a cheesy horror movie. 6 robed and hooded men came down into the panel room and gathered around the circle. One man carried a panting dog in his arms. The men started slowly chanting in what I can only assume was Latin, while the man who held the dog sat him down, then produced a knife. I watched in pure horror as the knife was plunged into the poor dog. It whined and struggled until it died. The chanting grew louder and intensified. The room grew deathly cold, and the candles around the room went out. It was stupid cold in there, even though it had been the dead of summer. I held my breath and stayed as still as humanly possible. After I wanted to say 20 minutes or so, the men began to leave. I sighed with relief, but I jumped out of my skin when my flashlight banged loud and clear against the locker door. God damn it! I watched in pure horror as the 2 of the men came back down the stairs. So you know what? I said screw it and kicked the door of the locker down off its rusty hinges. With my revolver in my hand and using my 6'8" 320-pound body to belt out the loudest, "Get the hell back here," I could. I held up my revolver and aimed it at the closest man near me. I clearly towered over the two men, and I watched as the other four robed men came barreling down the stairway. I was trembling, holding the revolver at the small crowd in front of me. "How long have you been here?" the first man asked me. "Long enough, my friend," I answered. "Fair enough. Leave, speak to no one about this," he replied. "Deal," I said. Each one moved aside from the entrance, and I made my way back up the stairs, my back facing away from them, revolver still aimed down the stairwell. And as soon as I made it out the door, I ran like my fat self depended on it. I made the 20-minute hike in like 5 minutes. I hopped into my truck and hauled it back home. I went back to Belle Isle about a month later and was relaxing on a rock near the pump house when a young man, probably in his early 20s, sat down next to me. He lit a smoke and spoke to me. "Tell me, my friend, do you believe in God?" he spoke. I took off my sunglasses and looked over at him, tapping out the ashes of a cigarette. "It all depends." My heart skipped over a couple of times when I recognized the face of the young man. "Take a guess who it is." He smiled at me. "On?" I swallowed. "Who knows?" He got up and extended his hand. "I would recommend you stay away from that house from now on, okay?" I shook his hand. "Sure, friend, sure." I haven't seen the young man since, even after going back as many times as I have. I got into urban exploration, or urbex, just because I love the thrill of exploring places long since abandoned. But within that time, I've tended to come across some rather terrifying experiences. One of my first experiences with that weirder and creepier side of urbex was when I first started back in 2014. About 2 counties over from where I live, there's a mental institution called Central State Hospital. Being on the older side of this county, remnants of the previous building from 1926 are still standing. From the historical documents and records that I uncovered while doing some research, Central State Hospital was built following the Civil War to aid in relief efforts to recently freed black slaves. But over time, the facility became one of its first in the South to offer mental hospitalization for black patients. The new building is now built right next to the old one. So after some digging, snooping, and spying, I finally worked up the gumption to break in and explore. Armed with the flashlight and a mounting curiosity and a pry bar, I pulled back one of the boarded up windows and crawled in. Not knowing what to expect, I began to wander the dark and creepy hallways of the old hospital, checking each room for anything interesting. The facility is basically one large square with 4-story corners, mostly like offices, 2-story corridors, and a now heavily wooded up courtyard. Where I got in was the east front corner. I wandered most of the corridors until I found a stairwell leading downstairs. On the sublevel, it was a long corridor that held up the autopsy room, morgue, and the furnace room. Now, after an hour or so of looking around, reading old documents, and noticing some suspicious drug use, I decided to make my way out, seeing it's now midnight. As I turned to leave, I noticed that the street security light that you could see from the bottom of the stairs was now absent. To my absolute horror, a massive black figure, about 8 feet tall, stood at the top of the stairwell. Now, being the 6'7" bruiser that I was, I did the most logical thing any man would do. I screamed like a girl up the stairs, through the figure, and out the pried open window, and into the loving arms of the police. Slapped with a potential trespassing charge, and sitting in the back of a police cruiser, I was questioned about the screaming. When I told the officer what I had seen, he turned about as white as a sheet. Apparently, since he and his partner started doing rounds on the property, they had constantly seen apparitions all along the open windows at the top floor. Needless to say, I got off with a slap on the wrist and a no more kind of deal.